Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, aspiring to be caffeinated, aspiring to be liked, commented on, subscribed to weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and what it's doing this offseason to be a college football playoff regular. I'm Eric Hansen, your algorithm for what's real with the Irish. He's Tyler James, in the weeds and on point with the recruiting scene. Together, we're the content creators, brand managers, and just plain regular guys at InsideNDSports.com. On tonight's show, we'll not only bring you the latest news on the recruiting front, including the weekend commitment of Tiki Hola and what's next. We'll tackle the big picture recruiting topics heading into the future of Notre Dame football. We'll also chat about our Next Wave series highlighting ND's June newcomers, and we'll chop it up about the Irish primetime schedule at Notre Dame Stadium this fall. And as always, we'll answer your questions and quips. So buckle up and fill up the queue. This is I got thrown off. The music was too soft, and I wasn't sure where I was in the music.
I couldn't hear you over the music very well, so I turned it down a little bit. So we weren't on the same page there.
That's all right. I feel like I should do that over again. Scott Fagan will not be a big fan of mine tonight.
That's all right. We'll push forward, and we appreciate everyone here with us tonight. Hopefully they're here for more than just the intro. We appreciate everyone that's in the live chat commenting. Jeff, Scott, Mike, Sid, we appreciate you. We appreciate everyone who helps us generate conversations throughout the show via the chat. And if you're watching us on replay, we want to hear from you as well. Everyone here should already be subscribed to us on the Inside ND Sports YouTube channel. If you're not, you have a chance to do so right now with a simple click. And we're always giving away 30-day free trials of InsideNDSports.com to our YouTube viewers who use promo code NDYT to sign up for their first subscription. So you can take advantage of that deal with by using the link in the video description below. That'll allow you to get access to me and Eric every day of the week and keeps you clued into what's going on the football and recruiting fronts. If you want to sign up, like I mentioned, there's a link in the video description below. So make sure you take advantage of that with promo code NDYT.
Okay, we're going to start our opening drive tonight. Notre Dame's spring recruiting surge, what it means in the big picture. So on Saturday, Notre Dame garnered a commitment from defensive tackle Tiki Hola from Bastrop, Texas, which is southeast of Austin. ND, SMU, and USC were the finalists. The 6'3", 270-pounder is the number 214 prospect overall in the Rivals 250. He is the number 16 defensive tackle. More numbers for you. He's the 15th commitment in the class and the third in a 9-day span for the Irish. Rivals team rankings has ND number 2, behind only USC. So on Wednesday, there's going to be 2 more Irish targets that are set to announce their college decisions. Running back Jonas Walton, who just finished second this weekend in the Class 4A 100-meter dash state finals in Georgia. And then the other is tight end Gavin Mueller. A couple more targets are on the calendar in July, and I'm sure there's a bunch that'll commit to Notre Dame and elsewhere in between those. Let's start, though, with the big picture, and then we'll kind of work our way back to Hola and some of the others. So, Tyler, I think Jeff Stevens had a similar question to this. What do you attribute to Notre Dame's recent surge, and how does Mike Martin, the new general manager, factor into that?
Yeah, well, I think if you remember a couple months ago, people were starting to get a bit antsy that Notre Dame wasn't rolling in commitments. Meanwhile, USC was getting all sorts of commitments. And a lot of that had to do with Notre Dame just hadn't been able to get guys on campus for spring visits yet. So the timing of the way things worked out with how Notre Dame's season ran, I think it was always going to trend this direction, that late April and May would be times where Notre Dame could cash in on its opportunities that it had in the spring to host guys on campus. But in terms of like what Notre Dame is using to be successful in recruiting, I think that recruits want to be at a place like Notre Dame right now. They want what Notre Dame is selling. Notre Dame is coming off playing in a national championship game. Its head coach is one of the faces of college football. It has proven assistant coaches on staff that have developed NFL players. The value of the Notre Dame education still matters to guys, and Notre Dame's doing a good job of identifying who that matters to. And I think Notre Dame has painted a favorable revenue sharing and NIL picture to be competitive with the top schools in the country. So Notre Dame's not lagging behind in those areas. So I think there's a lot of things that are going into this, but I think it starts at the top with the way Notre Dame has played and the program that it's being shaped into by head coach Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, I would agree that the assistants, and I think this before when people were kind of, not you people, but other people were panicking a little bit about what was going on at USC. And
yeah, where's Joe Long at? He's one of the guys that's always in the comments being very negative.
Okay, well, we will single out Joe Long, and we'll expect an explanation if he's here tonight. But the thing is, Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman and the assistants drive the recruiting. I do think the general manager and the recruiting staff is really important. And one thing that I've noticed about Mike Martin in the discussions that I've had is that he's really putting effort into getting to know not only the players that are on Notre Dame's target list, but the players that are not, that he's really working hard behind the scenes. But again, the people that do the best job of selling the program, I think, is Marcus Freeman and the assistants. So with that question, Tyler, I have another intriguing one for you. Can two things exist in the same space? Chad Bowden making waves at USC. He's the former Notre Dame general manager, and Notre Dame having a better recruiting class than, let's say, the ones that Bowden has been involved with without Bowden. Could those two things happen?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that Chad Bowden was something that USC needed. Like the early results are revealing there. They needed someone to get the recruiting department in line, be more aggressive, and start prioritizing California. I don't know why they needed him to do that, but he's being a part of that. It seems like an obvious, some obvious solutions there in terms of selling what USC can be and where it needs to sell to that too. But he has done that well. He is someone who makes noise in recruiting. He likes to be splashy. He likes to get to know recruits and make himself available to them and be a big part of the pitch to them. That, from my perspective so far, now it's very early in Mike Martin's tenure, I think there's a difference there. Like, one, Mike Martin is sort of settling into this role. He's not even been a college recruiter before. So he has a lot to sort of figure out, okay, how can I best be valuable to Notre Dame and to recruits and everyone involved in the situation? And Mike Martin isn't someone that guys are bringing up in interviews with me when I'm talking to recruits about people that are making impacts on them in the same way that maybe Chad Bowden was. But that was just the way that Chad inserted himself in the recruitment. Like, he was a constant part of that. And
they even called him Coach Bowden sometimes.
Yeah, Coach Bowden, or a lot of guys would just call him Chad too. That they were just that close to him. And that was valuable for Notre Dame then, is valuable for USC now. But as we're seeing, Notre Dame can still recruit on a high level without that person being the GM. Like that title doesn't have to be the one who's making the impact in the recruitments of these guys, the biggest impact. I think Notre Dame it appears to be on track to do better than last cycle. But I think it should be, given the circumstances that I laid out before, where Notre Dame's coming off a great season. The coaching staff has stayed mostly intact. There's a great belief in what some of the assistant coaches can do for those players. And Marcus Freeman is a guy that recruits want to play for, and that matters. I think Lincoln Riley is someone at USC who quarterbacks want to play for, maybe some receivers want to play for, but maybe that's not the same for defensive players or linemen, and maybe Chad Bowden is helping out with that aspect of it, whereas Notre Dame isn't necessarily needing someone in the GM role to be the catalyst for that.
Okay. Does having a top 5 class still mean what it did 10 years ago? And here's the context that I'm asking you this. With the transfer portal, does it make more sense to try to recruit guys that you can retain, even if it means they're maybe not as highly rated? Guys that you know that are buying into the Notre Dame message of 4 for 40 and not just, hey, I like their NIL and it's only bad weather 6 months of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always was and always will be room for that, like pre or post transfer portal era. Like, I think you are always going to devote a certain part of your class to guys that, you know, like, hey, I don't care what Rival says about him. I don't care what On3 says about him. We think he's a good player. We think he belongs at Notre Dame. We think that he can develop in our system. Maybe he's not here making plays as a freshman, but we see the path for him to be an impactful player in our football program. But I still think like you need to recruit top end talent. I mean, in terms of the conversation about a top 5 class, like if you, in my opinion, that wasn't necessarily a requirement. It certainly helps to have a top 5 class. And I think it's not just one top 5 class, but putting those together, but you can still win a national championship. Like that's not the only path to winning a national championship. I don't think that was true 10 years ago. I don't think that's necessarily true now.
But they do. I mean, readers and viewers do get fed that message from time to time from people.
Yeah.
Not from you, but.
Yeah. I mean, when you're Alabama and Georgia, when you're the most dominant program in a certain era, you're probably going to be a top, like they had things rolling at a level where people were having hard times competing with those teams. But Clemson,
I almost thought you were going to say a level never before seen. Keep going.
But Clemson won a couple of national championships, and they weren't always a top 5 recruiting team. Like I went and looked, just try to pull some numbers. The top 5, I looked at the top 5 classes between 2013 and 2016, and then the 2016 through 2020 champions. So those would be the teams that probably are mostly impacted by those recruiting classes. And Clemson won the title in 2016 and 2018, and it was only in the top 5 recruiting classes once in that 13 to 16 era. In 2015, it was 5th. So it can be done without being in the top 5, and that was then. And so I think maybe it changes now. I just think it's beneficial because the more 5-star players you have, the better odds that you'll have those guys turn out. Like some of them might not pan out and some of them won't pan out. That's just the history. Like not every 5-star is going to turn into a 5-star player. But the more you have, the better your odds are of getting those to turn into players. But there's always going to be room to have guys that you can develop. And even then, like, I know the transfer portal, you have a chance to lose those guys, but I'd rather lose a 5-star guy than lose a 3-star guy. Like, if that means I have other 5-star guys on my team, I'd rather have the opportunity to lose them than to never have them personally. But it's not the top 5 is something that we talk about, but I don't think it is this marker that indicates, okay, now you can win a national championship.
I think that's an interesting point, and I want to drill down on that before I get to my next question. So this is pre-transfer portal. Let's go back and look. I thought that was an interesting thing what you said. So Notre Dame had that big defensive class in 2011. And when you think about it, the one guy that jumped out in that class was Stephon Tuitt that really lived up to the billing. There was Ishaq Williams, who was a 5-star and had some issues being in the Frozen 5 guys. And then Aaron Lynch was only here for a year. And there were some other guys that didn't pan out, like Anthony Rabasa and some of those guys. But what you're saying is you'd rather have Aaron Lynch for a year than having somebody of lesser value, and each of them ended up transferring. So
if I get 4 Aaron Lynches, you know what I mean? If I get an Aaron Lynch and a Stephon Tuitt and an Ishaq Williams, I'd rather get those guys than to get three. I don't know, name your guys, 3 Isaac Rochelles, but even Isaac Rochelle was a Rivals 250 guy. But I would still like to have guys that are just that top end and
Right.
put it on myself as a coach to make sure that they can develop and pan out. But obviously, even when you're even those programs that are recruiting those top end guys, like they have insight and knowledge and belief in like, okay, this is a guy worth going risking for. I think it's easier at other places that maybe aren't as worried about, okay, not just like, will he stay here, but can he survive here? Like that is a big issue at Notre Dame. Like you have to be a Notre Dame student when you come to Notre Dame. And so that's an extra layer that Notre Dame's coaching staff and recruiting staff have to sort of evaluate while going through the recruiting process that maybe other schools aren't as concerned about.
Okay. And then following up on that. So Notre Dame tends not to get a lot of 5 stars. They have one on the roster right now in Kingston Viliamu-Asa. They have one coming next month in Will Black, but that's 22 in 24 completed cycles since Rivals been doing the 5-star thing. When you look at the point system that Rivals uses to determine their recruiting, early on quantity matters, but ultimately it's just the top 20 recruits in your class. They don't weigh, if you have a bunch of 3 stars or 2 stars, those don't factor in. So given what the math looks like, what do you think? I mean, is getting a top 5 class as necessary for Notre Dame, given the fact they don't have a lot of 5 stars? But you look at their draft just now, they had a bunch of 3 stars get drafted.
Right.
So what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be nice to get more 5 stars. I think there's a middle ground. It's not we can't get 5 stars or we are getting 5 stars. I think like Notre Dame is an area where it can get maybe 1 5-star a cycle, but it can get also 3 or 4 guys that maybe are Rivals 100 players. And then you get 10 guys in the Rivals 250s. I'm making up numbers there, but I think those are realistic markers that you can expect to see from Notre Dame if they're recruiting at a high level. Because 5 stars are set with the idea of being a first-round draft pick. Not all those guys are going to be first-round draft picks, but there's still plenty of talent beyond those 32 guys in the class that can make significant impacts on your team. And I'm not even talking about the guys that maybe develop into those guys, but guys that everyone would want in their class as elite top 100 recruits that I think Notre Dame is making itself more available to and more realistic to come to, and a place where those players want to come to based on the success of the program and sort of the vibes or swag. I feel stupid saying those words, but like just sort of the persona of the program and the attitude around the program and the respect for Marcus Freeman and his coaching staff. I think Notre Dame is a much cooler program right now than it has been in quite some time in the eyes of high school recruits. So I think it's going to be hard for Notre Dame to get in the top 5 with any consistency. Like I think once every 4 or 5 years would be great to see, but it's still going to be hard to do. Like you're going to have a storm of like, you know what, we ended up signing 3 5-star guys out of Chicago in that class. There was just a lot of talent in that class. The last time Notre Dame did something like that was the 2013 class. And it ended up that a lot of those 5-star guys didn't pan out. One of them didn't even end up coming to Notre Dame, and Eddie Vanderdoes. So I think the formula for Notre Dame is to hope that there's more 5-star guys that are viable for Notre Dame. Like Max Redfield was someone who should have been he was a guy that seemed to be a fit at Notre Dame, and that made sense. Eddie Vanderdoes, he didn't even see himself as a fit very much. Greg Bryant felt like someone that Notre Dame was going after that wasn't a traditional Notre Dame recruit. So Notre Dame maybe took a chance on him. Is there more guys that are going to end up as 5-star recruits moving forward that seem like fits for Notre Dame? I think it's sort of cyclical. and it's not necessarily predictable. Like you don't necessarily know if the recruiting class out of Illinois or Ohio even is going to have the same number of guys that are fits for Notre Dame and elite talents.
I like some of the names you brought up because there's two clumps of 5 stars in Notre Dame's history with 5 stars where they had more than 2. One was 2008. That was Kyle Rudolph, Dane Christ, and Michael Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And their senior year, Notre Dame was meh. But their 5th year, which none of them were around for. Well, yeah, Dane Christ transferred to Kansas, and Rudolph was in the NFL, and Floyd was gone in the NFL. They played for the national championship, and then the 2013 team, which was Jalen Smith, Greg Bryant, Eddie Vanderdoes, Max Redfield. Their senior year, Notre Dame went 4-8. And then the next year they had a revival in 2017, which would have been their 5th year. None of them were there. Mm-hmm. In fact, a lot of them weren't even there a couple of years later. So I do think that's interesting. Last thing before we take a round of questions, Tyler, that I wanted to get to was what the rankings look like right now. Notre Dame is number 2. USC is number 1 right now. There's some surprises, though. Texas is down in the 30s. Alabama's down in the 30s. Michigan is 40th. Tennessee is 20th. Now, again, we're in May. Should anything be made of that, or do we think those teams are going to be eventually pushing into the top 10 and challenging the teams that are in the top 10?
I think now's the time. I think now's a more appropriate time to have concern. I think that the time to be maybe panicked is if you get through the official visits of the summer and it still doesn't seem like you're getting guys jumping on board. Then it's like, okay, what do we have to do to sort of get things rolling? Now, I don't follow those programs close enough. So Oklahoma could be in the running for 3 5-star guys that just I'm not aware of.
And they're 48th.
But yeah, Oklahoma's 48th. And so maybe they could make a huge jump with just 2 commitments. Yeah, I mean, because the variance with high star recruits can elevate you pretty quickly. We're like, you pulled up the top 10 for us. All of those classes have at least 8 commitments. I don't know the numbers of Oklahoma, how many guys those schools have in the classes, but I think, like, if you're just asking me about those schools, like Michigan, there's got to be some concern as long as there's investigation still looming, if that is playing a role in what kids are feeling some uncertainty about. Oklahoma hasn't been a hot recruiting team, at least to the level that Oklahoma would expect it to be. I think it finished 18th last cycle. So I don't think that they're rolling into this recruiting cycle with a lot of momentum, but maybe it has a good season and that changes things. But sometimes it's hard to impact the current class with a good season, like we're seeing with how Notre Dame is being impacted from the 2024 season with its 2026 class. Alabama is interesting, being 34th. Like, I don't think Alabama is the same in terms of the elite of the elite. Like, they're always going to be in the conversation to have the number 1 class like they were under Saban, and maybe even have to fight to get in the top 5 sometimes. Texas and Tennessee, I assume Texas will be fine. There's lots of talent just in Texas. I mean, Notre Dame's benefiting from getting some out of Texas, but
they're the most NFL draft picks.
There's still plenty of guys down there. Tennessee is interesting to me. Tennessee is when I went through that exercise earlier, I was talking about previous rankings. Tennessee had 2 top 5 classes in the 2013 to 16 range, and basically nothing to show for that. The other ones were Florida State was consistently up there. They had a number 4, number 3, and number 2 class in that time frame. Michigan. It was interesting to see some of the schools that were recruiting well, and even Ohio State. Ohio State had 3 top 5 classes there. And didn't win a title in that era.
And they're not going to win a lacrosse title this year.
They are not.
They got smoked by Notre Dame on Sunday. Okay, it's time to go to some questions.
All right. We'll leave with this. I think I answered most of it, but I'd be curious to see what Eric has to say too. I don't know that I asked his opinion enough as we were talking about recruiting there.
I'm
Jeff
just
says,
sitting here trying to look good tonight.
recruiting has really picked up since early April. What has turned the tide? Was the football operations group just having a lot of turnover, indecision on the right targets, or question mark?
Yeah, I don't think it was indecision on the right targets. I think there was a game plan going in. You had a lot of turnover with Chad Bowden and others leaving. And there was also times where it wasn't a super active time. And Mike Martin needed to get his feet wet. Notre Dame needed to hire the rest of the staff. But, I mean, Marcus Freeman never stopped recruiting. The assistant coaches never stopped recruiting. And I still felt like there was still a lot to sell coming off a national championship season. I think whatever the money situation looks like once we get past this House versus NCAA lawsuit settlement that's going on forever, I think Notre Dame is going to be competitive in that space. And so I felt like, well, let's wait until Notre Dame has some unofficial visits and even the official visits in June, but they've already surged up to number 2. And I think some of it is just all those good things were in place and now they're at full strength. And the occasions where kids were committing, where they could visit, where they could meet with the new general manager and visit campus, I think those things are happening. So that's why I thought that would be good. I mean, South Bend can be pretty brutal in the winter, but Notre Dame's campus, I go walking at Notre Dame a lot at night, and it's beautiful, even at night when you can't see stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is like they're just Notre Dame kids weren't getting to Notre Dame's campus yet for visits. Notre Dame had to get its stuff in order. It had to start practicing for spring, which that was delayed because of the long season. And Notre Dame, and I think rightfully so, like they're not pushing guys to get on campus before they're practicing for the spring because they want the football experience to be a big part of the spring. Because listen, March isn't the best time to visit Notre Dame's campus. Like it can feel like December in March pretty frequently, and so you don't want to risk not having a football focus. And obviously the campus tours and everything else that goes on the visit and the facility tours, like all those things can happen regardless of the time of year. But having a practice to sort of anchor your recruiting visit, you get to see the coaches in action, get to see the players, get an better understanding for the program. Notre Dame did a good job, and it was not an easy job too. We're aware of this just from as we were trying to plan our coverage. The schedule changed pretty I think it was like 2 or 3 different times. The full spring schedule, like dates were moving around, so it was hard for Notre Dame to get guys committed to visit.
They even sent graphics that had the wrong dates to recruits.
Yeah. So things were changing, and that's a hard time of year for changes to get thrown in because it's not official visits. So Notre Dame is not providing the transportation to get there, and so these kids have to figure out ways to get there, and they're scheduling visits to other schools usually in that same time. Like rarely do kids make just one visit in the spring. It's usually part of a spring visit spree that they're on to get to other places. So you have to sort of fit each school in based on who you want to prioritize and when they're practicing and when they're available. So that was a large part of it. Yes, the absence of I think if Chad Bowden doesn't leave, like I think Notre Dame could still have maybe generated more momentum coming off of the playoff just because he was a big part of so many of those relationships. But I still think like the bump in recruiting was always going to be coming when spring practices started rolling and the guys get on campus, and then that gives them something to chew on a little bit more and then go ahead forward with their decision. All right. Rajon says, does Marcus believe in what he's selling more than previous coaches? Is he getting more top recruits to believe it too?
I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to say, yes, I do think that he does. And I think he's a more convincing seller. And I think he's selling something different. A lot of the coaches that I've covered, and I've been here since 88, I've been in this market since 1988. So that was Holtz, the end of Holtz, and then Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, Charlie Weiss and Brian Kelly before Marcus Freeman, and a little bit of George O'Leary, who didn't have time to recruit in those 4 days. I think a lot of it was smoke and mirror stuff in terms of how bad the weather was, how hard the classes were. And I think some of the coaches did try to sell the 4 for $40, but it was like, hold your nose with some of these other things and all the rules that you have here. And Marcus Freeman says, choose hard. This is going to help you later in life. And I think that it's a pretty convincing sales pitch. And every time a recruit commits now, Myron Tagovailoa Amosa, who is part of the recruiting staff, tweets out, choose hard, live easy. So, yeah, I do think he's done a really good job with that.
Yeah, and one thing pretty consistently when I speak to recruits, when I talk to them about Marcus Freeman, almost always the first things that they mention is how much he is selling them about the educational value of Notre Dame. So he's not running away from that. It is central to the recruiting pitch that Marcus Freeman, as the head coach, is making to the guys. Now, it's not the only part. Everyone else is combining to show them the football picture of Notre Dame, but it is not something that they're looking to try to get around. It is central to the motto of choose hard, that this is what we guys that come to Notre Dame are choosing to do, and this is why they do it, and this is why it is worth doing it. And I think Marcus Freeman has really understood that, and maybe even said some things early in his Notre Dame tenure that got him in trouble with some Ohio State fans about choosing what to do as a high school recruit. So I think he really buys into what Notre Dame is doing and believes in what it's doing, and that because Marcus Freeman is so genuine, that comes across to those recruits in a good way.
And I'll tell you what, I mean, as a parent and even as a student that really is open to hearing a message, he doesn't shortchange you on the football thing. He's like, we're going to give you life with football, but we're giving you a life after football too. And I do think it's a lot of things that's a part of life that a lot of 17-year-olds aren't thinking of, the life after football, until it's brought to their attention.
All right, I'm going to bring up these questions that Sid is talking about because I don't believe it, and I have some evidence. It says ND will hardly ever have top 5 classes. They are biased towards SEC and Big Ten. It is what it is. These guys won't admit it, but come on, guys, commit. He immediately drops. He said Rodney Dunham has already dropped. I don't think that's true. I have here, I'm going to put a link in the chat that I did earlier. Let's see, when did I do it? Back in March. That examines the ranking cycle for everyone that signed with Notre Dame. 12 Notre Dame signees saw their rankings increase, either overall or with their position if they weren't in the Rivals 250, and 10 Notre Dame signees saw their rankings decrease. None of the recruits saw their star ratings decrease after committing to Notre Dame, and 4 Notre Dame signees saw their star ratings improve during that time. So I know there's the aluminum foil conspiracy theorists that want to believe that Rivals hates Notre Dame and that it's just, well, when someone commits to Notre Dame, they drop, but there's just not evidence to see that. And you could say, I know what I see. Well, then provide me the numbers that are what you see. I don't think you have the numbers, because I just told you the numbers that are in the last class. Now, I haven't done every class, but I'm going to continue to monitor this. And I just don't think there's some conspiracy. I know all the analysts. I talk to them. I ask them why guys drop or why they jump up. And they never once say, well, he's going to Notre Dame. That's not what they do. They pride themselves more in what they do. And it's like Adam Freeman does not benefit by the Georgia site getting more subscribers, or like the Notre Dame site getting more subscribers. Like his job is completely separate from these independent sites that are covering these teams. So I just don't know why folks feel so adamant about this being the business model for recruiting analysts.
Tyler, let me ask you this.
Rant over. Sorry.
In relation, and back when there were conspiracy people, I thought it was a tinfoil, but we'll go with aluminum foil. but I'm wondering, from a bias standpoint, do you think, and Tom Lemming mentions this sometimes, and we're definitely not seeing in the 2027 cycle, because a lot of Chicago kids are very highly ranked, including the ones that were on our podcast. But do you think sometimes there's a regional that, if there's a Chicago kid and a Georgia kid that are kind of equal in ability, does the Georgia kid kind of get the nod because he's from Georgia and they produce more NFL players?
Yeah, it's not. I would say there is some of that regional bias, but it's not just because of where they're from. It's because of who they're playing against.
Gotcha.
Like if you're from Georgia and we think you're elite, you're going to have more opportunities to see guys play against who the analysts think are also elite, whereas maybe in those areas that haven't been producing talent at such a high level can go against that. So like back when Chicago was had a lot of 5 stars, those guys were playing against each other. So you had a good barometer of, okay, well, I've seen so-and-so go against so-and-so, and I think they're both great. And I think they both played well against each other, or they're playing well against another guy that's maybe lower ranked or higher ranked. So I think there's a lot that goes into that. I do think, I think our analysts do pay attention to the trends of the NFL and try to like focus their attention. Like if they see Texas has the most amount of NFL draft picks, then they're like, okay, we need to make sure that we are spending more time evaluating kids in Texas. If they feel like they haven't done that already. I think that there is a cause and effect there. And that is, I think it's probably a good way to handle it. But I think as an evaluator, like when you see someone, I think you don't necessarily like where they're from shouldn't influence you that much in like the talent that you see in front of you. There's also the factor of like, well, listen, if I can go to Georgia and see 25-star recruits play in 2 weeks' time, like I'm going to do that rather than have to go to 5 different states in the Midwest over 2 months to see the same amount of 5-star recruits. So sometimes like the amount of time that you can spend in areas, like there's only so much time you can spend evaluating recruits. And so I think that can impact how things end up turning out as well.
Okay. Do we have more questions, or do we want to go to our next topic?
We got more questions. Jeff Stevens says, what's the rationale for Marcus Freeman, Chris Ash, Marty Biaggi, and Mike Denbrock staying in the office during May, not recruiting?
Marcus isn't allowed to go recruiting. It's the Charlie Weiss rule. A couple decades ago, Charlie Weiss and Pete Carroll dominated May, and a lot of coaches didn't want to go out. Head coaches didn't want to go out recruiting, and those guys made hay when they were out on the recruiting trail. Charlie on the offensive side of the ball. And so they passed a rule that head coaches couldn't be part of the evaluation period in late April and early May. I'm not sure about Biaggi, Denbrock, Ash. Tyler, maybe you can fill them in there.
Yeah, Denbrock was out on the road early, and now maybe I'm guessing Jeff is being specific, and I don't know this off the top of my head in terms of May, because there was some April visits, and so maybe that was when the way the calendar aligned when Mike Denbrock stopped making visits. Like at lately, Harris Biven, who is an offensive analyst that works with tight ends, has been out checking out tight ends rather than Mike Denbrock. So yeah, I mean, I think, and Marty Biaggi, he's a special teams coach, so there's less guys that he's recruiting, and also they don't really recruit as many high school recruits anymore in terms of specialists, because a lot of that is coming through the transfer portal too. So I think it's better for instance, like Al Washington his priority has been mostly with 2026 targets on the defensive line. But then also Nick Sebastian, who's a defensive analyst who works with the defensive line, he's been spending time evaluating 2027 guys. And so they've been able to add extra emphasis to position groups by keeping coordinators at home, because you're limited by the number of guys you can send out there. Now, you could say, well, yeah, couldn't Chris Ash be that guy instead of Nick Sebastian? Yes, but Nick Sebastian is someone that they feel he's been at Notre Dame longer than Chris Ash. He's been at Notre Dame for a few years now. And that's who they're going to see when they come to practice and see practices and see working with the defensive line. And they'll hear from players at Notre Dame about the impact that those analysts make on them. So the analysts tend to be younger guys too. The guys that are getting on the road, like Javon Codlin, who's a recent hire. I'm trying to think who else. I think that there's someone else I'm missing in terms of analysts that's been on the road. But I think it's been smart the way Notre Dame has done that. I do think there are times and places for those coordinators to be more involved with recruiting. But I think there's Notre Dame has done some good things and creative things in terms of getting different guys on the road that maybe can make different impacts with recruiting.
Has there been an offensive line maybe analyst?
Yeah, Rob Delaney. Yes, okay. Rob Delaney is the guy that is an analyst who helps with the offensive line with Joe Rudolph. He's been out on the road as well. That is a good trade-off in my opinion, especially let Chris Ash settle in. Al Golden wasn't a big driver as it related to recruiting. I think Mike Denbrock can and probably will be in this very specific window that we're talking about. He hasn't been out on the road, but he has seen like the top tight ends that Notre Dame's going after in the 2026 cycle. He has visited with those guys, so it's not like he has not seen them at all. So he has been involved, and they do need tight ends in the class, so it's important that he got out there.
Yeah, and sometimes there's things that go beyond the scenes. Like Al Golden had some surgery one year in the offseason. Joe Rudolph had some off-season surgery. So sometimes you'll miss little pockets, but they're still recruiting. They're still very active in what they're doing. And as far as Chris Ash, the thing that impressed me was the defensive guys that we had on the podcast from the Tom Lemming thing, as we call it in Chicago. They all, when they came to visit, they met with Chris Ash, and they had a very solid idea of what he's about, and their parents got to meet him and so forth. So he's still interacting with recruits.
Scott Fegan says, where does Notre Dame need to recruit to get a top 5 class? Texas, Florida, Georgia? ?
I'll let you do that. I mean, I think they need to, well, I'll say this. I mean, I think they need to go where they feel like they can get really good players. And Texas definitely has the most. I can read off, we're going to do this a little bit later, but I can read off which states produce the most NFL players. But I mean, a lot of it is about relationships. If there's equal players, one's in North Carolina, one's in Colorado, and you have relationship with that coaching staff in that school in North Carolina, and it's a Catholic school, and the one in Colorado is a public school, the chances of you landing and retaining the guy in North Carolina is probably better than Colorado. But I'll let you speak to that, and then I'll kind of give the geography lesson.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be difficult to. An important part of recruiting, we talk so much about like recruiting as it relates to position coaches, and Mike Brown needs to recruit wide receivers better. But when it comes to specific areas, there still is value, though that's not like it's structured a little bit differently than it maybe was a decade ago. Like in the past, like a decade ago, and probably farther behind that, but that, a decade ago is about when I was getting my start in this business. Guys were assigned areas more rather than position players that they would go recruit to. So you would have a coach assigned to New Jersey and Pennsylvania and stuff like that, where there still is that, but it's more position based. But I think it's important to have guys in these talent rich areas that do have ties there, and they don't have to be your assistant coaches, right? They can be these analysts. They can be, it could be your general manager. It could be the guys in your recruiting office. Like, I think it's important to have guys in your building, men or women, when I say guys, that have ties to areas. So they not only know who's important, who is good in certain areas, but also know the people that can help them determine whether or not this is a Notre Dame kid. I think those are things that are important to have, and say, hey, I know this guy's getting all kinds of attention, but like, can he make it at Notre Dame? Is he actually good enough to play at Notre Dame? Guys that maybe you trust more to give you honest feedback than just going off of what you're able to attain from watching them on your own. So I think there are, in terms of where, I think it's wherever the talent is, but I think you need to have some grounding in those talent-rich states like Texas, like Florida, like California, like Georgia, Ohio, Philadelphia, New Jersey. And these are all areas that Notre Dame has had varying levels of success at in the past, but it can sway one way or the other. Like, for a while, Notre Dame was really trying in Florida, and then maybe some of that backfired. So then they turned their attention more to Georgia. And so I think trying to be as balanced as you can be is probably the best way to do it.
And time efficient too. You go to Georgia, and Atlanta has so many great players in that metropolitan area. You can get to a lot of players very quickly than, say, a state where players are spread out more. But I'll give you the geography real quick on this last Notre Dame, or last NFL draft class. So there were 257 players drafted. 37 of them came from Texas. That's 14%. 26 from Florida, 22 from Georgia. California was fourth with 16. Then Louisiana and Virginia with 10 apiece. Alabama and Michigan with 9 apiece. South Carolina 8. Maryland 8. North Carolina 8. No, I'm not doing all 50 states. Ohio with 7. So those were the ones with more than 6. But Massachusetts and New Jersey were just below that at 6. And some of it is who's willing to leave their state. You know, trying to pull a Texas kid out of Texas is a lot harder than trying to pull a North Carolina kid out of North Carolina. There's not, oh my God, I got to play for NC State kind of thing. And at New Jersey, there's not kids going, oh my God, I've grown up with Rutgers posters on my bedroom wall. You know, so they're easier to pull out of those states.
Yeah, and Jeff Stevens provided a good example. I don't know why this didn't come to my head, but Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa, he has connections in Hawaii. He also has connections in terms of being Polynesian, and then that has been something that Notre Dame has leaned on with recruits when they come to campus. Obviously, he's a defensive lineman, so they use him to help with defensive line recruiting as well. I expect Myron to get out to Hawaii, I believe, this week. I don't know for certain, but that's my educated guess there, because Notre Dame has not been out there yet, but I think that should happen this week, and Myron would be the one to do so. One more question here from Sid Irish: are we taking 25 plus this cycle? I think so, Sid. I waited to get to this question because I needed to do the math a little bit while Eric was talking, because I think more in terms of position numbers than the overall class, and I had to just sort of add those up when I went through it. So yes, I think Notre Dame will probably be in the area of 25 plus. Like, they're at 15 now. I think they'll get one more running back, 2 more receivers, 2 tight ends, potentially an offensive lineman, a defensive tackle, a defensive end, a linebacker, a cornerback, and a safety. That gets you to 26 right there. Now, that it might not play out exactly like that, but I do think the way Notre Dame has been attacking recruiting so far in the cycle, I think that's the ballpark that Notre Dame will end up in.
Are you calculating it with it being an 85 scholarship limit or a 95?
I'm not calculating it at all. I'm just basing it off what I know in terms of who they're going at. I'm not trying to do the math in terms of how that works for the scholarship numbers. I'm just basing it off of how I understand Notre Dame has been recruiting at those positions, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. We're going to drill down on the spring surge here. How big of a get is a Rivals 250 player at the interior defensive line? That would be Tiki Hola. And So I'll let you talk about him, and then I got a follow-up question for you.
Man, it's 7:50, and we're just talking about Tiki Hola. We've been talking a lot here. Yeah, I think it's a big get. Notre Dame hasn't signed a Rivals 250 defensive tackle since Gabriel Rubio in the 2021 class. It's only signed 2 others since 2016. Those were Jason Adamalola and Darnell Ewell. Notre Dame did it more regularly early on in the Kelly era. We talked about some of those guys: Lewis Nix, Jerron Jones, Sheldon Day, Eddie Vanderdoes, Jay Hayes, Jerry Tillery. So yeah, it's a big deal to get Tiki Hola, and especially in the manner that Notre Dame was able to land him.
And what can you tell us about the final days, hours of the pre-commitment phase of that recruitment?
Yeah, when we cover commitment announcements, we tend to have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen from our sources, or sometimes that'll even include the recruit himself. Like sometimes I've already done an interview. Like I'm not going to give that away, but I have a pretty good indication of how things are going to go because the recruit has told me already. But my reporting on Tiki Hola's announcement indicated that Notre Dame didn't even know what his decision would be until he announced it. So it doesn't qualify as a surprise because we felt that Notre Dame was in a good spot there, but it was just something that I had said on the Insider Lounge that I wouldn't be surprised if he picked SMU, and someone accused me of hedging, but it's just that there wasn't necessarily a certainty of where he was going to go, and so Notre Dame found out the same way that Notre Dame staff found out the same way that the fans did as well.
We talked a little bit about Texas recruiting. Rivals National Analyst has a Texas story about Notre Dame's recruiting in Texas. I recommend you read it. It's on our site. I'm going to skip down to 2 players in play for Wednesday, Tyler. Running back Jonas Walton, tight end Gavin Mueller. Who ends up at ND, in your opinion, from those 2?
Yeah, I have a future cast in for Jonas Walton to Notre Dame. I especially coming off the conversation I just had. I have not talked to Jonas Walton, so I don't know what his decision is, but I believe it'll be Notre Dame. I like Notre Dame's chances to land the 4-star running back from Georgia. Alabama, Florida, Stanford, and Tennessee are the other finalists. Gavin Mueller, I don't think will pick Notre Dame. He's down in Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Colorado, and LSU. Colorado may be the team that ends up with him. I'm not certain there. Notre Dame wanted to get him on campus for an official visit before his decision, which is something we reported previously, and he is stuck with his plan to go ahead and commit before doing that. So I don't think it'll be for Notre Dame.
Are there bigger fish in the tight end pool for Notre Dame to get?
There are guys that there's 3 guys Notre Dame is focused on: Evan Jacobson, Ian Premer, and Matt Ludwig. And those are guys that are all from like Iowa,
Kansas,
from
Kansas,
and then Ludwig is from Montana. So some interesting territory that Notre Dame's going into with tight end recruiting.
Montana had a draftee. They were in the top demographic for draftees per capita in this last NFL draft. Okay. So we'll have a story in the morning about the latest 2027 Rivals individual rankings update. Do you think Notre Dame is closing in on any of its 2027 targets for commitment, or are we a little bit too close?
Yeah, there's nothing there's nothing imminent as far as I've heard. Probably the 2 guys that I like the most for potential early commitments would be running back Amir Brown out of North Carolina, and defensive tackle Richie Flanigan, the other son of Jim Flanigan and younger brother of James Flanigan. I think he ends up in Notre Dame. It's just maybe just a matter of time. Now, I think he probably wants to go through the recruiting process for a while, so I don't know that it'll happen soon necessarily. But if he decided it's like, all right, I know what I want to do, that wouldn't be a shock.
Okay, the Inside ND Sports podcast guests, there were 5 from the 2027 class. They all made significant jumps. Any correlation, but seriously, who of those 5 do you like for Notre Dame? Do you want me to feed them to you one at a time, or do you remember them all?
I got them. And I have them here. Tight end Brock Williams, wide receiver Quentin Burrell. He moved up 63 spots. Offensive tackle Cameron Wagner moved up 105. Israel Abrams, the quarterback, it was new to the Rivals 250, and Braden Parks moved up 31 spots. Just like, I know, kidding aside, but like, part of the reason we felt it was important to get to Chicago for this event is because of the, in my opinion, rise in talent that's backed up by this Rivals 250. There's 10 Illinois recruits in the Rivals 250 for the 2027 class. The previous 3 classes each had 6. So it's been consistently 6 the last 3 classes with the 2026, 2025, and 2024 classes. And the 2027, there's 10. So it seems there's more talent in the state in that 2027 class. I like Cameron Wagner the best in terms of most likely to end up at Notre Dame. And then I could probably go either way between Quentin Burrell and Braden Parks as guys that could end up at maybe as second most likely to end up in Notre Dame's class.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with Parks. He's got a lot of people in his ear. He's been to Notre Dame a million times because Tony Jones Jr. is his second cousin, and they're pretty close. And Crystal Wirtz is his godfather. So do we want to hit more questions before we talk about nighttime football?
This one is putting us on the spot a little bit, and I think you need to do this because you have fallen in love with Bone Crusher more than anyone. Eric and Tyler from Scott Fegan, who is the Bone Crusher recruit for 2026?
There's no other people on this planet that are like Bone Crusher other than Lewis Nix, who is my favorite Notre Dame player of all time. But I would say, I mean, I don't know that there's a comparable, but if we're going to go for a big-time Chicago lineman, Mikhail Blade, I would think from Simeon, although they don't play the same position, would be the guy that would be in that conversation. But I think Bone Crusher, when his name is Caleb Tucker, when Rivals comes out with the 2028 rankings, I think he will be very, very high. I mean, like top 20 type high, maybe top 10 type high. I mean, there's just not a lot of human beings that are 6'5", 367 that move like him.
Yeah. There's a number of different ways I could take the question, Scott. So I don't know if you mean like who could be a potential impact, like defensive lineman from Chicago. Mikhail Blade would be that candidate. I've said for a while, Kadon Finley, I think, is the most important 2026 target for Notre Dame left. I don't know that I have Bone Crusher. Just the nickname and persona is so interesting, and I don't know that there's anyone that fills that in terms of 2026 targets. Javian Osborne, Notre Dame's recent running back commitment, is going to be a very important part of the class and is very vocal. And I think Notre Dame fans are going to enjoy him a lot. So much different in terms of size than Bone Crusher, but someone that I think fans will enjoy his personality. All right, let's talk about night games.
Okay, so Notre Dame unveiled its kick times for 7 home games in 2025 with 3 of them at night. So 7:30 Eastern time starts. They are Texas A&M on September 13th, USC on October 11th, Navy on November 8th. That matches the most home kick times in ND history. The 2018 season, which was a playoff year, also had 3 night games. Notre Dame restarted playing night games in 2011 after a 21-year absence. They had played 4 before 2011. Once they got to that point, they started out 1 a year and then kind of morphed into more. Marcus Freeman wanted more cowbell and more night games, but called it a double-edged sword. So, Tyler, is 3 a good number, and did they get the right 3 on the schedule?
I think for recruiting purposes, there should be at least 2 every season. I think it makes getting recruits on campus for games easier. A third helps in that. But I think you should only do 3 if warranted. I'm not sure that this season warranted 3. I don't think the Navy game should be a night game. If you had to do 3, I would have made Boise State the night game. Both for opponent purposes and
at least they put it on NBC
and date purposes, because like a November night game, it can be brutal. That can be very cold. Now, granted, it's early November, so maybe it's not as bad. But an October 4th night game is probably more attractive than a November 8th night game, at least in terms of if you want to go to the game.
Given that the opener at Miami is already a designated night game, what do you think the overall regular season number ends up?
I would say 6.
That sounds about right.
So Miami, Texas A&M. I think Arkansas would be a night game. and then probably Boston College or Pittsburgh. I don't know which one is more likely, but I would hedge between one of those two. So I would say 6.
Yeah, if Stanford had a good coach and a good program, I think that's a night game, but I don't think we're in that territory right now, and with them being an ACC team. So do you want to
Well,
go?
you don't play night games out west very often either. I guess it would be a night in the east, but night games out there don't happen very often.
But Notre Dame designates those as night games because they're in their media guide, because they're night their time. It's
Okay.
5 o'clock on the Pacific time and 8 o'clock on the West Coast. So they do designate those in their media guide as night games. We are into overtime here a little bit. We can save the next wave series, since we're going to be doing more of those stories for next week, and take a few more questions and wrap this up if you want to.
I don't. Sid had asked, could Notre Dame take 7 defensive linemen? And I said that they wouldn't. I think the number is more likely to be 5, and a slim chance at 6. And so then Sid said, but they could if they wanted in. I think they would have to be very elite for Notre Dame to take 7 defensive linemen. I would be surprised if it got to 7. But I don't think there are other questions. Maybe I can scroll back and maybe miss some, but I think that's it.
Well, while Tyler is scrolling, we appreciate all the questions, comments, compliments. We will be back Monday at our regular time. We'll do the next wave series. I've done a couple of those stories. If you've missed them, James Flanigan, who I think probably has the best chance of playing as a freshman among the June enrollees. And then I did Will Black, who's a very unusual 5-star. He's from Canada. And of all the 5-stars that Rivals has ever had, there's only been 2 that have played their high school ball in New England. And he's one of those 2. Christian Wilkins from Clemson in 2015 was the other.
Yeah, I would encourage folks to read those stories if they haven't already. Those were well done by Eric. And I'm looking forward to reading the rest in terms of the incoming freshmen that he can get a hold of, because there's some intriguing guys that we haven't talked as much about as of late because they weren't on campus for the spring, but plenty of talent still to get on Notre Dame's campus. And we can talk more about those guys and the odds of their impacting Notre Dame next season in the future. Appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. We'll be back next Monday. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed to us at InsideNDSports.com, use promo code NDYT for a 30-day free trial. There's a link to sign up in the video description below. Make sure you like the video. Tell us who had the better looking shirt in the comments, and we will see you guys next week.